share my presentation, so I hope that everyone can see my slides now and that everyone can hear me.
Yes, of course, Mr. It's very clear here.
Excellent. So good afternoon, everyone. It is early morning. I'm based in London, the capital of the United Kingdom. I hope that you're all healthy, all fit and safe during this unprecedented time that we live in this global pandemic. And as you can probably know, lots of the teaching is happening online now at the universities, at the colleges around the world. It's either partly or fully online. So today I'll be talking on a topic that I'm very passionate about. It is entitled Health-Related Physical Fitness Assessment in Children and Adolescents. And of course, feel free to take notes if you want to, but also for those who want to have a copy of this presentation, you can have that at the end as well. I'm going to reference lots of studies, and if you want to find more information about a different topic and get deeper into the knowledge, then you can find the particular study and on the internet and find more information about it. So with that said, I would like to thank my colleagues from the Faculty of Sports Science at the State University of Semarang, Indonesia, for this invitation. Thank you very much for inviting me to take part in these lecture exchanges. Now, before we start, I would like to draw your attention to some descriptions. And because this talk will be all about physical fitness, it's good to look at the description of physical fitness in the scientific literature. And the Science Council of Europe describes physical fitness as the ability to carry out daily tasks without feeling fatigued, without feeling tired, with enough energy to spend for your free time. There is another description which is provided by the American College of Sports Science, which is a really big organization in the field of sports and exercise science. And also, if you're interested, you can take a look at the website of the ACSM. They provide one of the biggest conferences in the world, and you can join them as a member as well. So the ACSM describe physical fitness as the measurable outcome of a person's physical activity. So this is a measurable outcome. This is quite important, as you can see in the next slides, because we can measure physical fitness and therefore we can assess it and evaluate it. But then we mentioned physical activity here. So what is physical activity? Physical activity is a behavior. It's something that we do. Physical activity includes any movement produced of our muscles, which increase energy expenditure. And is physical fitness important? Yes, I think it's very important. And actually, latest research for the last few decades show that physical fitness is important health factor and health marker, specifically in children and adolescents. And the results from cross-sectional and longitudinal studies in Europe show that physical fitness is a key health marker indeed. And that was a great work produced by Ruiz and his colleagues in his review. So this is a systematic review. This is not just one study. It combines multiple studies, cross-sectional studies, which are studies with like a screenshot. The participants are assessed once, and there are these type of longitudinal studies in which the participants are assessed multiple times through their lifespan. So these studies are very time-consuming, very expensive. So we're talking about all of those studies, and there is a clear path that physical fitness is indeed a powerful marker of health. It can also be utilized to predict the health status of the children in their later phases of their individual life. And that's why many personal trainers, many physical education teachers and sports coaches are looking at the health-related physical fitness. So these components of physical fitness, which are specifically linked to health, to our health, and how to improve our health. And there is another brilliant review which was published in 2008 by Ortega and his colleagues, and this was entitled Physical Fitness in Childhood and Adolescence, which is a powerful marker of health. And again, it's a good idea to take a look at this review if you have time later, which is on the internet, it's freely available. But to summarize, the review concluded that a higher level of physical fitness is associated with a decreased future risk of obesity as well as cardiovascular diseases. Also, higher level of physical fitness is associated with improved skeletal health, improved quality of life, and not just physical health, but also improved mental health, which is very important nowadays. Now, why is that important today? Well, we live in a pandemic, we live in a global pandemic. So in March this year, 2020, the World Health Organization declared the COVID-19, which is a coronavirus disease, as a global pandemic. And now, because of that, we have to deal with some negative consequences. We're living in many cases in different lockdowns. There are changes in our food-seeking behavior, and we're exposed to more sedentary lifestyle activities. And I think that all of these might, and I think at some point will, put some pressure and go into another pandemic that we haven't dealt with yet, the obesity pandemic. And very quickly looking about obesity, what is obesity pandemic? Well, from the World Health Organization official data, we can see that obesity has tripled since 1975. Millions of people are assessed as obese, billions are assessed as overweight. So surely this is a significant problem, a health problem that we have had for quite a long time. Now, specifically in children, because this talk will be concentrated on children and adolescents. So here we're looking for over 340 million children and adolescents being overweight or obese in 2016, with a tendency, this number, to get even higher and higher. And the conclusion of the World Health Organization is that obesity is actually largely preventive and it's preventable, and we can interact as sports coaches, as physical education teachers, as scientists, we can interact and make this pandemic and deal with that, but the issue is very complicated, really. There are different interventions that we can do in order to improve our health and to reduce the rates of obesity, and I just put a few here. We've got physical activities, that's me doing yoga, but anyone can choose different sports. There are plenty of different physical activities, and of course nutrition. And improving and increasing your physical activity will have impact on your physical fitness and from there on your health as well. But we don't need to wait until it's too late and start physical activity. I'm all about shifting this thinking that we need to do physical activity because of the feeling of it, because it's not just it's gonna help us to be healthy, but because it's important for us, because of the culture of doing sports. I grew up in a family which was quite sporty. My father was doing lots of sports. He was a rower. He was doing lots of professional rowing. My brother is a national champion in rowing, so I was happy enough and I was lucky enough to live in a family where sports was all around me. So for me, sports is part of my lifestyle. So I don't have to do it because somebody is telling me to do it, but because I love it. Another topic, of course, is nutrition, just simply doing some interventions, improving the amounts of fruits and vegetables can dramatically increase the benefits of health. And obesity is looked as a problem with the energy deficiency, the energy we intake with our food and the energy we expand the energy expenditure with our everyday activities and our lifestyle. But this will be nutrition, sports nutrition will be another topic that might be we can have in the future in another lecture, maybe in person one day in your country. So going forward, this link between our pandemic at the moment, the global pandemic, COVID, and obesity pandemic, is actually heavily researched right now because the topic is unfolding, it's happening right now. And officially there is a word for that. So there is a new word here, I'm not making it up, you can check on the internet. This is a combination between COVID and obesity, and we call it covicity. So in 2020 we have a new word, which is covicity. So the description of this word is weight gain as a result of anxiety-induced overeating during COVID-19. I think they're gonna increase this explanation of the word with also because of the sedentary lifestyle. Now, in the scientific literature, also this word already exists. A brilliant study, which is in a preprint, so it's not published yet, it's under review, produced by Zaka and colleagues, and entitled "A Pandemic Within a Pandemic, Obesity," showed that obesity, yes, is a significant problem, it's a significant public health problem which predates COVID, or it was there before COVID, and unfortunately will expectedly get worse with the global pandemic at the moment and after that. And these dual pandemic, these both pandemic together will have, unfortunately, the conclusion is that we'll have some harmful outcome in not just the short but also medium and long term. But if we move to this so-called negative link and try to concentrate on the positive link that I outlined earlier between physical fitness and health, and going back to the description of physical fitness, yes, physical fitness is a measurable outcome, so we can measure it. This is very important because if you want to improve our health through physical fitness, then we need to know what is our level of physical fitness and whether our interventions, being physical activity, being doing sports, whether that helps and actually improves our physical fitness. So the question really is, how do we measure physical fitness? How do we accurately and successfully measure physical fitness? And mainly, there are two different big methods to measure physical fitness. Once you can do that in the lab. So if you measure physical fitness in the lab, obviously these tests there are very accurate. So for example, you can measure the maximal oxygen uptake, the VO2 max of a person, and that will give you a good indication of his or her cardiovascular fitness and cardiovascular health. So that will involve the person to run on a treadmill or on a cycle with a mask, and very accurately a VO2 max can be measured there. However, there are lots of disadvantages of the methods, and this is that we need qualified technicians there. We need sophisticated instruments. In many occasions, these instruments are very highly cost. That means it involves lots of money. Not everyone can afford it, and not everyone can put their clients or bring their athletes to the lab and test them. And also it's time consuming. And because of that, we've got another type of tests called field-based tests. So those tests are less accurately, but they give a good estimation of the level of physical fitness of each participant. They're easy to administer, they involve minimal equipment, and they are low in cost. The most important thing is that you can administer these tests with a larger number of participants, which is ideal for sports coaches who work with children in different clubs, ideal for physical education teachers who work with lots of children throughout the schools. So that's why we're going to concentrate mainly on the field-based tests today. And these tests have been used throughout since mid-50s. So lots of physical education teachers, physicians, and they know that this is important, the physical fitness is important, so they prepared something called physical fitness test batteries. A physical fitness test battery is a combination of different tests together, which aim to assess the whole physical fitness. So one test includes a few different tests inside that you can implement in order to assess physical fitness. And there are numerous test batteries which are created specifically for children and adolescents. And nowadays we can see that there are more than 15 batteries which are used throughout the world. So my extensive research showed that there are at least 15, mainly used in the United States and Europe, and they are more international test batteries, and we're going to look at them. We're going to look at the whole list of test batteries, and we might see which test battery might be useful for you in your future job as you go to either sports coaching or physical education, or if you have a client that you want to assess. Before that, we can look at the components of the health-related physical fitness. Now, in the scientific literature, there are different organizations which describe these health-related components in different way. So as you can see, European studies refer to only 4 health-related physical fitness components, that being body composition, cardiorespiratory fitness, musculoskeletal fitness, and motor fitness. The American College of Sports Science or Sports Medicine, on the other hand, refers to body composition, cardiorespiratory fitness, muscular strength, and muscular endurance as a separate components, and flexibility. And as you can see, the Institute of Medicine, they've got 4 main components. So although there are differences between which are actually the main components of health-related physical fitness, we can conclude there is a consensus between the scientists. We can conclude that the physical fitness is a multidimensional structure which comprises several different components. Always, we include body composition and cardiorespiratory fitness. And there is a third component which includes one or more than one of these different physical qualities which are listed on the slide, such as strength, flexibility, balance, coordination, agility, and speed. And now looking at the first and one of the most important component of physical fitness, being a body composition. Body composition is essential not only for optimal health but also for sports performance. So if you're teaching children who are athletes, who are competing in different sports, body composition might be very important, and you might want to actually accurately measure and assess this component of physical fitness. What is body composition? Well, it refers to the amount of different types of body tissues: the bone tissue, the fat tissue, and the muscle tissue. And there are different methods to assess body composition, but the most widely used parameter is looking at the percentage of body fat. Also, we widely use the body mass index, the BMI, to assess weight, and sometimes in addition to something called WHTR, which is the waist to height ratio. We're going to look at every single parameter in a second. And also the upper arm muscle area gives a good indication specifically for children. So these are the most common tests which are used for children and adolescents, which are recommended in these physical fitness batteries. Now, in a very interesting report from the World Health Organization in 1995, they concluded that yes, growth in children is important, and actually the body dimensions, the sizes of children, overall they reflect the health of the children, and therefore anthropometry as a method, so the measurements can be used to predict not just the health of the children but also performance. if they are competing in a particular sport. Now, going forward, we can look at this most important parameter which is used to assess body composition. This is the percentage of body fat. There are different ways to assess body fat. It's recommended for children and adolescents to use either a professional scale, being Tanita or Moron or one of those scales, or to use skin fold methods. Now, if you use your scale, obviously, it's quite easy. You're going to put your student on the scale, they're going to step on it, everything will be calculated automatically, so it's quite easy to be done. How does that work? Well, your student stands on the scale, and there is safe and low electrical signal which goes through their body. It's interesting that this electrical signal passes very quickly through water, and as we know, around 76% of our muscle mass is water. So if you have more muscle mass, this electrical signal will go quicker. But the electrical signal will have some resistance through fat mass, and this is called the impedance here. And therefore, by using an equation, which is validated in advance in the scientific literature, there are different equations, of course, but by using the equation, the scale calculates for you straight away this predicted body fat percentage. On the other hand, you can use a skin fold method. So using these two that you can see on the right side, which is a caliper, which measures skin folds. And one of the most recommended way to measure skin folds is by using the Slaughter's method. Slaughter in 1988 published this method. It's widely used in research at the moment, and it's very easy because you measure only 2 skin folds. This is for children and adolescents. For adults, the skin folds are more than today, 6 skin folds. But because we are concentrating specifically on the young population here, we have to take into account that it's time consuming, and 2 skin folds is really good and easy to assess. Now, looking forward, there's some footage here that you can see, and if you haven't used this method before, if you haven't been assessed, you can see how that happens. So basically, these 2 skin folds, one is the triceps skin fold. So this is on the back side of your arm, on the triceps brachia, the muscles on the back of your arm, somewhere in the middle. And the other skin fold is just below your scapula, your shoulder blade. It's a diagonal fold. So these skin folds, taking them with this caliper in millimeters, adding them together and placing them in the equations that I provided for you on this slide. You can get the full equation if you want also from the paper, the original paper of Slaughter and his colleagues. So this will produce a good estimation of the percentage of body fat in your students. Now, going forward, I would like to draw your attention to the body mass index, or BMI. This is widely used anthropometric measure. It gives a good indication, especially if you are assessing a group of people. Now, unfortunately, the disadvantage of this method using body mass index is that it doesn't distinguish between the fat tissue and the muscle tissue. And therefore, you can have inaccurate assessment for some individuals, specifically individuals who are involved in strength sports. And because my sport is gymnastics and my research is also not just in physical education but in gymnastics, I will talk a little bit about that as well. I will show you some of my personal studies that I have been involved in. Now, how do we measure body mass index? It's quite easy. Just taking your body mass in kilograms, dividing by our height squared. And just an example, if you are a 70 kilogram, if you weigh 70 kilograms, and if you are 1.72 meters, just dividing 70 by 1.7 squared, and that will give you your body mass index. In this case, 24.2. And then we look at this number and we compare it to the norms provided by the World Health Organization. In this case, if your body mass index is more than 25, that will put you and assess you as an overweight. If it's higher than 30, then that will assess the person as an obese. However, for children, specifically for children, this body mass index is not really, it can be accurately assessed this way. So that's why the World Health Organization recommends to assess the body mass index in a different way. Yes, we've got the score, it's calculated the same way, but then after that, you don't just assess the number, but look at the percentile score of this number. And I'm going to explain how we do that a bit later and what percentile score is when we start looking at the assessment and evaluation of the results. Now we're looking at the moment, we're looking at the tests that we're using to assess physical fitness, but later during my talk, we're going to look at the way how we evaluate these scores. So that will be a little bit later. And a really good study that I published with my ex-supervisor for my PhD dissertation, Dr. Petrov, specifically on the body mass index. It's a review where I'm concentrating specifically on the advantages and disadvantages of the use of body mass index. So you can take a look. There is a website where you can download the whole study and go deeper into the topic if you wish. Now, quite interestingly, you can see these two individuals. On the left, you can see one of my gymnasts that I had the chance to teach. His name is David. I was teaching him for a period of 5 years. He was ranked second in my home country. I'm originally from Bulgaria. It's a small country in Europe. So this is my best gymnast, and as you can see, he's very lean, good physique. On the right side, you can see a bodybuilder. Now, it's interesting about these two individuals. Why am I showing you that? Well, because I want to show you the disadvantage of using the body mass index for some individuals. So these two individuals were assessed as overweight based individually on their body mass index. So as you can see, I mean, they are not overweight, definitely. And here in this case, just taking the body mass index is not accurate assessment of their physique. And there are different studies that I cited at the end of this slide, as you can see, from 2013, 2014, 2016, and 2019, in which case I looked at this issue, and time and again I found that for individual gymnasts, the gymnasts that I worked with, individual gymnasts, we found that the body mass index not necessarily provides the best result, and sometimes assesses inaccurately these individuals who are practicing in sports. And that was very clear, of course, in the literature for adult athletes, but it wasn't so clear whether it's the same for athletes who are children. So that's why I spent lots of time on these studies, and it will be really interesting, I think, for you to take a look. At the end of this presentation, you can have all of the references, so all of the studies that you can, if you wish, find and look and read further. Now, going ahead, the next one is waist to height ratio. How we measure this WHTR method to assess body composition. Well, simply taking the waist circumference divided by our height. So it's very easy measurement. You just need to measure the waist circumference of your student and the height of your student, and you are getting a number which is not correlated with age, which is great. So that's it. You've got this number, and you're comparing the number to a cutoff of 0.5. If it's below, well, that's great. If it's above 0.5, this individual might be of a health risk, either overweight or going to obesity. So this method using the waist to height ratio is also recommended to be used in addition to the body mass index and the percentage of body fat. Now, as I mentioned, body composition is not just body fat, it also looks at your muscle mass. So the method which is widely used for children is the assessment of the upper arm muscle area. It is always measured on the right side. You can see the equation that you can apply in your assessment if you want to do that with your students. Just simply taking the arm circumference, and you need the skin fold, so you need a caliper to calculate, to measure the skin fold, specifically the triceps. And you can see the equation might look a little bit difficult, but if you input this equation once in your Excel sheet, then Excel will do it automatically for you, for your students, and it will be really easy. So going to the next slide, we are in our cardiorespiratory fitness, or the second most component of health-related physical fitness in children and adolescents. Now, cardiorespiratory fitness refers to the respiratory system to supply enough oxygen for the working muscles when we are exercising. One of the most valid measure of cardiorespiratory fitness is using the maximal oxygen uptake, or so-called VO2 max. It is expressed in milliliters per kilogram per minute. Now, the maximal oxygen uptake is the highest rate of oxygen that we can consume by our skeletal muscles while we are doing physical activities. One of the most widely implemented tests to assess cardiorespiratory fitness in children are the 20-meter shuttle run test, by far the most widely used test. This is the so-called beep test or multi-stage fitness test. There are different names for that test. It's used throughout the world to assess aerobic fitness. And you can see other tests that are also used here on this slide. Now, going to the next slide, I would like to draw your attention on the 20-meter shuttle run test, because it's really used a lot in many schools around the world. And also I had to go through some problems and issues when I was doing my PhD dissertation just a few years ago, not so far a long time ago, actually, 2015 to 2018. So I was assessing the cardiorespiratory fitness of my gymnasts, and I had to apply a reliable test, which in this case I chose to be the 20-meter shuttle run test. Now, for those who are not familiar with the test, basically your student run between two lines which are 20 meters apart with a beep signal. Okay, so when so you need an MP3 recorder or CD which will produce this signal, and when the student hears the signal, then obviously you have to run to the other side. You have to complete these 20 meters and then run back and forth in these 20 meters. And with time, these beep signals are getting shorter, which will make your student to run faster. That's the whole idea of the test. It's a progressive test. Eventually your student will get really tired and wouldn't be able to continue. So that's when the test finishes. We're recording here shuttles, distance, levels, and also speed, because this is a particular speed that you need to maintain in order to make this distance with the particular beep signal. So what are the problems and the issues? Well, there are several different CDs out there. There are lots of different apps. Sometimes the beep signals start with different speed. The original protocol was described first by a gentleman called Luc Leger. This is the original 1-minute protocol for this test. You can find the original paper and the protocol and how the test is done in his paper that I cited here. Now, it is difficult to follow the speed and also the shuttles if you assess many students at the same time. Because at school, obviously, you assess a few, 5 or 6 students at the same time. And with this seated, it's very difficult. They're not going to run exactly the same. So it's very difficult to keep track, because some will stop earlier, some will stop later. So that's a problem that I had to deal with. So I had to administer this test with my students, and I saw this is a problem. Another problem is that, okay, this test gives you only levels and shuttles at the end, but that's not enough. I mean, with these levels and shuttles, if you don't transform this result into VO2 max, into a number which is VO2 max, then you can't really accurately assess cardiorespiratory fitness. So there are equations which take into account the level or the shuttles that you run in the test and transform this into or estimate your VO2 max. But again, the problem is that there are different equations. So which one to use? It's not clear. And actually, one of the best one to use is produced by Lecturer, who is the person who created and described the test. And that's the one that I recommend for you to use. So because of all of these issues, I had to come up, together with my supervisor, of course, my science supervisor, we had to come up with a solution, how to run this test without these issues. And we decided to create a software. So that's what we did, and there it is. It's called Beep Shuttle Junior. We created this software as part of my PhD dissertation. You can take a look if you want. There is a website below. There is a demo that you can try. So the software actually administers the beep test. It uses the original 1-minute protocol, which is described by Luc Leger. It provides the duration of the test, the stage, so each stage level, each shuttle, where the person is. So if you stop a person, if somebody stops the test, if your student stops the test, you can stop the participant and you look straight away which shuttle, what's the speed. It calculates automatically, the software calculates the VO2 max, the predicted VO2 max of your student. It gives a percentile score of this VO2 max. We're going to talk a bit later about percentile score, why and how we use it. And also it assesses this percentile score based on age-specific and gender-specific criteria, so you can see exactly where your student is in comparison to the international norms. So going to the next slide, we published this software in 2018. I presented it in a few international conferences. You can see some footage from my archive. And also, if you want to take a look at the paper which is published, you are please welcome to go further and find out more information about it. Now, the other components of physical fitness, which are sometimes looked at separate component or a mix of components, are listed on the next slide. That includes strength, flexibility, balance, coordination, agility, and speed. Now, in many cases, the components strength and flexibility, they can be found as one component called musculoskeletal component. Also, balance, coordination, agility, and speed, many times in the literature, in the scientific literature, we refer to them as a motor fitness component. This motor fitness component, also you can find it in the literature as a skill-related or performance-related fitness. Now, let's look at musculoskeletal fitness and why this component is important for our health. Well, higher level of this component, higher level of musculoskeletal fitness improves our posture. This is all based on longitudinal studies and cross-sectional studies. Higher level of this fitness also is associated with a lower risk of musculoskeletal injuries, which is important if you're working with children who are competing in different sports. Higher level of musculoskeletal fitness is associated with better bone mass, which decreases the risk of osteoporosis. It is associated with improved glucose uptake, which provides better blood glucose control, and also is associated with increased metabolic rate when at rest, which will provide a better body weight control. Now, in terms of flexibility, as I mentioned, this musculoskeletal fitness in many cases is looked together with flexibility and strength. So poor flexibility in the back and your hip joint may contribute to development of lower back pain, which is one of the most common problems in adults actually. Lower back pain is quite common, and obviously improving your musculoskeletal fitness will provide you, better weight, better health, and hopefully not having these problems. The tests that we're using to assess this component for children and adolescents, the recommended tests are listed on the slide. As you can see, we've got the standing long jump test, very straightforward. We know how to assess that. If you want to go into details how to do every single test, you can, because we're not going to have time to go through that today, but you can just look at the manuals of a particular test battery where they explain every single test, how it's done, what is the protocol. So looking at the test, these are the standing long jump test, the hand grip strength test. We've got a flexed arm hanging position, which is part of the fitnessgram fitness test battery, and curl up test or sit up tests. So for all of these tests, I find them quite straightforward. So there is nothing much that I can offer here except for the hand grip strength test, because here we are actually looking at the most widely applied method to assess upper body strength, specifically in children and adolescents. So it's used a lot. We use something called a dynamometer that we squeeze in order to assess their hand grip strength. However, it is not clear which elbow position is associated with achieving the maximal hand grip strength, specifically in children. Okay, and this is owing to inconsistent findings in the literature. So as you can see, I gave you just two examples here. The American Society of Hand Therapists recommends that the test should be done with 90-degree flexed elbow. However, the American Center of Disease Control, the CDC in America, recommends this test to be done with straight elbow. I found different studies in the literature that recommend, the authors recommend that the best posture is 135 degrees. So we've got really inconsistent findings. So when I was about to do this test with my students and I was working on research on their assessing their physical fitness, then I decided just to together with my supervisors, of course, with our team, decided to run our own study and to see if we can figure out what will be better for children. Is it with straight elbow? Is it with bent elbow? So we did that, and we used two different dynamometers, as you can see on the slide. The red dynamometer is a digital Japanese dynamometer. It's called TKK. So TKK. The other dynamometer is an American one, and it's called DyneX. So these two dynamometers are heavily used in research. That's why we chose them. So we had our 60 participants, so children from one of the schools that I used to work and help them with their physical education lessons and do some gymnastics with them here in London. We took about 60 children, and each child squeezed both dynamometers randomly, once with straight arm, once with bent elbow flexed 90 degrees, as you can see on the footage, on the figure in front of you. Now the results showed that in both cases, with straight arm, as you can see, with straight arm, the results were higher, statistically significantly higher. So the children did better with straight arm in comparison with bent arm. That was correct for both dynamometers. There was a bigger difference when we used the TKK dynamometer, which is the bigger one, maybe because it was a heavier, and that also put some pressure when you're holding it in 90 degrees, especially for small children, for example, young children who are the age of 6 and 7, that might have an effect. So my recommendation here from our study, which was published this year, by the way, so you can take a look at the study on the link provided here, Our recommendation is, if you are applying this test for children between the ages 5 and 11, to use the strength elbow position, which is more appropriate. In this paper, we also looked at the validity and reliability of these ball dynamometers, whether they are valid enough to be used in research. So there is plenty of interesting information to look at if you're interested. Now, going to motor fitness, or a combination of balance, coordination, agility, and speed. Some authors, of course, put these components as separate components. Other authors put them together. We're going to look just at the most used, most widely applied tests to assess motor fitness, and these are the 4x10 meter shuttle run test. This is used in the AlphaFit physical fitness test battery. The Flamingo balance test, which assesses your coordination, your balance, so you're standing on one foot, and the 50 meters run test, which assesses your speed. Now, going forward, I would like to draw your attention to the physical fitness test batteries which are out there at the moment, which are used around the world. So this table that you can see on the right side is, I believe, the most comprehensive table and up-to-date table with physical fitness batteries specifically for children and adolescents that you can find anywhere. I published this in my article, so you can find the whole list of the tests. So you can see the tests, you can see the recommended age, you can see the name of the physical fitness battery. Again, just to remind you, a physical fitness test battery is a combination of different tests put together which aim to assess the whole health-related physical fitness. And as you can see, there are lots of different batteries. Many of them are used in America, in the United States. Some are used in Europe. So here you might take a look at this systematic review in 2017. You can find the full list of the batteries and more information about each battery. But here you might ask, okay, which battery actually is good to choose for your students if you're working with children, or if you're working one day with children as part of your job. So here you need to consider lots of things. First of all, you need to consider the time you have to administer these tests. Do you have enough time? If it's a whole class, what's the time that you will be able to spare to do this physical fitness assessment? You have to consider your facility. Are you working in a school, in a gym? Do you have the 20 meters to do the beep test, for example, to include this test in your assessment? Because many of the physical fitness test batteries include the 20-meter shuttle run test. You need to identify the health-related components, because if you're assessing physical fitness in relation to health, obviously you need to concentrate on the health-related components, and we looked at these components earlier. These are, as you remember, the body composition, the cardiorespiratory fitness, and a mixed component of one or more between musculoskeletal fitness, flexibility, and motor fitness. Now, you might need to determine which of those components presents the most important information, because you might be working with children who are competing in a particular sport. In my case, I have been working with lots of children who are competing in gymnastics, where flexibility is very important. So I would actually assess their flexibility, and I would add flexibility as a separate component. So that's another important issue that you need to ask yourself, which component should be used here depending on the participants that you will be assessing. And then you can see the test batteries and the names that I provide based on the scientific literature. These three test batteries, the Eurofit, the FitnessGram, and the AlphaFit, are the most widely internationally used batteries around the world. So some studies refer to the AlphaFit, which is the newest one. They say it's based only on pure research that is based only on specifically on the health-related components, being body composition, cardiorespiratory fitness. So they, some studies, some authors refer to the AlphaFit as an ideal battery, and it used a lot in Europe. However, FitnessGram, the American fitness battery, is the most widely implemented battery in the world, not just in America, despite the fact that it consists of a lot more tests, so that might be very difficult for some physical education teachers to administer these tests, because it takes more time and it takes more instruments and it's more expensive. So on the next table, I put the most important, the most widely used batteries here. 3 of them: Eurofit, FitnessGram and AlphaFit. And I listed the tests of each battery. And also on the left side you can see the components: the body composition, cardiorespiratory fitness, muscular strength and endurance, motor fitness, flexibility and balance. So as you can see, AlphaFit has the smallest amount of tests, and they are all concentrated on the health-related physical fitness. Now FitnessGram has more tests, and Eurofit also, but for example, for body composition, they all refer to the body mass index as well as body fat. So I think whichever battery you use, you find you have a good estimation of the level of your physical fitness. So here there is no right or wrong answer. It's more about looking at the particular population, or looking at the students, the individual students that you assess, and choosing the best one for them. Now, what we have talked about so far, we looked at the physical fitness. We found out that physical fitness is actually the measurable outcome of a person's physical activity and their habits. So we can measure it. We linked it with health. We saw that scientific evidence from cross-sectional and longitudinal studies, lots of reviews, I'm not talking about just single studies, but systematic reviews, showed the link between a high level of physical fitness and better health. We looked at how to measure physical fitness. I gave you some ideas, the main methods, and also we looked at the most widely used batteries to measure physical fitness. And now, quite importantly, as the last part of this talk is, okay, we measured, we used this test, we measured physical fitness, fine. Now we've got all of the results, but the question is, how do we evaluate this physical fitness now? Just for an example, you've got your students, your subjects, you measure their height, weight, you calculate their body mass index, you measure their skin folds, let's say, so you calculate their percentage of body fat. You've got all of the numbers, that's great. But now, how do you know whether somebody is at risk or might be at risk, health risk or risk of being obese in the future? Well, that's quite tricky, and it's not talked enough, it's not mentioned enough in the literature. Well, how do we assess that? Well, we use something called reference norms. So these are gender and age specific fitness reference norms. So they are specific for the gender, so depending whether it's a boy or a girl, and they are specific for the particular age. So that's how we classify the level of physical fitness in children and adolescents. This is the way to also monitor, to track physical fitness in the population. So first you measure, you use your test, you measure, and then this score is compared against a chart which is gender specific. I'll show you a chart, I'll show you exactly how to do that, just as an example. And this score, for example, you've got a fat of 15%, let's say. So this score after that is transformed into something called a percentile score. So this is a score between 1 and 100, and that gives you an estimation. It assesses your result and it tells you how good the score is in comparison to everyone outside, like internationally. Now, how do we do that? As an example, you can see a chart. This specific chart is for girls, and it is for the hand grip strength. Okay, that's a reference chart. You can see your percentiles on the top, going from 1 to 100. You can see the age on the left, going from 5. We're talking about only children and adolescents here. My talk is on children and adolescents, so starting from the age of 5 to the age of 18. And let's say that you have a student, a girl, who is 10-year-old girl, and she is doing the hand grip strength test. So you've got your dynamometer, the tool that you measure your hand grip strength test. You give it to her, she squeezes it once, twice, you use the right protocol. So she squeezes that, and the result is 20, let's say, just for example, 20.4 kilograms. Now, how do you assess that? Well, you look at the age of this girl, which is 10. I highlighted this in yellow, so you can see that. So you look at the age, and then you look at the result, okay, 20.4 or roughly around there, and this is the 90th percentile. So therefore, this score of 20.4 will be assessed as a percentile score of 90. What does that mean? It means that she has better hand grip strength than 90 out of every 100 girls at her age internationally. So, going forward, how to evaluate body composition. Now, you do the same thing for each test. Specifically for body composition, we're talking about height, weight, and body mass index. How do we evaluate that? Well, again, you have to find reference charts. Now, you might want to use national charts or charts which are produced specifically for your country, if you have that in the literature, if somebody did that, because obviously somebody has to do a research and to assess lots of people in order to produce these charts. If you don't have that, you can go to and refer to an international chart. For example, I always recommend the WHO charts because these are the international norms for children and adolescents. They're used throughout the world. And luckily enough, WHO provides us with a free software. You don't pay anything for it. It's a great software called WHO Anthrop Plus. I've got the link here. If you're not familiar with this software, you can look at it. It's from the WHO website. You can download it and you can use it to assess the body composition, specifically height, weight, and body mass index of your students. Now you can see on the right this figure, which is you can see some curves. In many cases, these charts, the numbers that you saw from the previous slide, are also represented as curves, and you can see the percentile. In this case, I think this is for height, but it's the same for body mass index and for weight. So you can assess weight, height separately, and body mass index. The green line is the 50th percentile, and most people are there. Most people will be around the 50th percentile, which is the healthy zone, the green zone. If your student is above the 85th percentile, that means that your student will be assessed as overweight. If your student is above the 97th percentile, according to the World Health Organization norms, it will be assessed as obese, depending on your student's age and gender. So wonderful software. If you were to assess physical fitness and specifically body composition in children, I recommend using this software. It has been used in research and it's recommended around the world. Now, this was body composition. However, for the other tests, specifically the test that I'm highlighting here, standing long jump, hand grip strength test, 4x10 meter shuttle run test, and the beep test, the 20 meter shuttle run test, or the VO2 max, which is the maximum oxygen uptake which we need to have as a result from the beep test. So reference values are difficult to be found. And I was looking in the literature specifically for European reference values or international values. And sometimes you've got that, but there are gaps. And that was the case here in Europe. When I was doing my PhD dissertation, I had to find norms for children and in order to assess them. So I used the WHO software that I mentioned before for the body composition. However, for these tests, there were lots of gaps. Here, as you can see, the ages between 9 and 13, there were not published percentile score normative values for these children for those tests. Now you can find probably national national norms, but that will be for the particular nation, let's say for Spanish people or for Portuguese people. But would that really work for your nation? It might not be accurate. So that's why it's always better to use international norms. So that was a huge problem when I was writing my dissertation, these gaps in the literature, so I couldn't evaluate appropriately my students. So we had to again come up with a solution. So at the moment, what you can see on the slide is these curves again. These are the percentiles again. So the numbers from the tables, but presented in a curve, in a smooth curve. So the experimental research out there published norms for children, as you can see, between 6 and 9, and norms for adolescents between 13 and 17, but there is a gap in the middle. So I had these people who were aged 9, 10, and 11, so I didn't know how to assess them. What we looked at with my supervisors, we looked at progressively with time. This example particularly here is for hand grip strength for children. On the left is for girls, on the right is for boys. So particularly with time, the strength increases. And that's why we decided to come up with a mathematical solution. So what we did, we interpolate this data, we linked it together, and we produced these smooth curves, which can be now used in order to assess all of the children, including the children within the gap. And of course, this is not the best solution. Obviously, it's better to have data from experimental research, real data, but it's still something, and it can be used now up until this experimental data is published in the literature. So going back to our example, the hand grip strength test, on the left you can see the reference chart for girls, on the right is for boys. And all of the data that you can see in yellow here, bear in mind in yellow, this is the published data, which is the real data. Everything else around was our work. We interpolate and extrapolated the data. So we predict, with other words, the data based on these numbers which were published. So we didn't just close the gap between 9 and 13, but we also interpolated the 20th percentile, the 30th, the 40th, the 60th, the 70th, so you can more accurately assess the right percentile for each child. And that was done for each gender and for all of these tests: the standing long jump test, hand grip strength test, 4x10 meter shuttle run test, and the maximum oxygen uptake. And that was published in 2019 in the European Journal of Physical Education and Sports Science. So these charts are published and they are recommended to be used for together with the AlphaFit test battery. So if you decide to use the AlphaFit test battery at some point to assess your participants by using this test battery, then you can use these charts for the successful evaluation of your participants. Now, going to our home message, to take home message. We looked at physical fitness. I hope that you agree with me that physical fitness is a major health factor. I provided you with scientific evidence from multiple studies, which were systematic reviews. So they engaged lots of cross-sectional and longitudinal studies, which prove that physical fitness is a major health factor both in children and adolescents. We looked at what physical fitness is. So we found out that we can measure physical fitness, which is all great. We looked at the ways to measure specifically health-related physical fitness, the most important components which are related to health. So that can be easily measured by using field-based tests, which will give a really good estimation of the level of physical fitness. We looked at the different test batteries that you can implement, and I suggested and recommended the 3 most widely implemented test batteries. So you can choose one of them, that being the Eurofit, AlphaFit, or Fitness Gram. Then when you do the whole evaluation, you've got the bunch of numbers that you need to actually assess by using charts. So we look at how to assess appropriately children's results depending on their gender and their age. So by using gender and age specific norms for accurate evaluation of their results. And one home message from me, I would like to say that it's really good to lead by example, to be out there, to be fit, to do the activities your own, because your students will follow your example. Not necessarily they will follow your advice, but they follow your example. I can see that from experience, being able to coach here in London, as well as my home country for the last 10 years. It's really important to be these role models out there and to lead by example. On the next 3 slides, you can see the references. So all of these are the references for the studies that I mentioned during this talk. So if you're interested in finding more information for each particular subject, then you can just Google the name of the reference. You can find the study and you can read and learn more about it, which is great. So you've got 3 different slides with lots of different references. Some of them are my own studies, which can be found freely on my website, open access. And with this, I would like to conclude my talk and to thank you very much for your attention.